So people in the community had asked, why are we going to India? What is this about? Um, and I realized, well, it would be very important to share this, but I also realized that as I was putting this talk together, I thought, well, it doesn't start with, Venerable Damcho get on the plane yesterday. It goes back about 2,500, 2,600 years. So I hope you're not too hungry. But it's kind of amazing to look at the threads of how this has all come about. So I need to also just say right off the bat that this is my personal view of the history of the story, and it's also the Abbey's corner of the history of the story. So it will have that perspective, but it shows this incredible connection that we have back to, again, to the Buddha. So anybody who's read the Pali Suttas has heard this phrase again and again. Thus I have heard at one time the Blessed One was staying at Sravasti. Pali for Sravasti or Sravasti, depending on whose Sanskrit pronunciation you are following. Sravasti. It's the city. Sravasti at the time of the Buddha was a very big, important trade city. They say there was nearly 1 million people living there. It was a real hot spot. And at the time that Buddha was teaching, for the very first, very generous, I won't go into the whole story, but very generous layperson bought the land and established the first monastery for Buddhist monastics near Sravasti, Jetavana Monastery. So the Buddha's monastics, of course, wandered. We know that. They wandered widely. And so this was the first time that they actually had a place to gather. And it was at this place where the Buddha spent 25 varsas, or 25 rains retreats. So over the course of our monastic training, we've learned how the varsa came to be, how it is that, it happens during in India, during the time of the rains, where walking on the crops and walking on the animals during the rainy season would be very dangerous. And so the monastics came together and were together for 3 months. And that was a time when the Buddha gave a lot of teachings. At the time, sometime later, when the nuns community was established, the nuns couldn't wander. The nuns, by our precept, were not allowed to go out and wander. So the nuns, too, were living near this monastery. So it was a place where there were both monks and nuns communities. And during that time, it was the place where the Buddha gave most of the sutras. I've seen a couple of different numbers, but one of them that clicks to my mind is they gave over 800 sutras are given at Sravasti, that place itself. So Sravasti flourished, the city flourished for a while, the monastery flourished for a while, and then around the 4th century AD, through political reasons and natural reasons, the city itself began to fall into ruin, the monastery itself fell into ruin, and by 636, when Xuanzang came from China, it was not functioning as a monastery, it was really just a ruin. And this ruin has been there since 4th century AD. How many hundreds years is that? 1700? 18, anyway, a long time. 17, yeah. Anyway, so it was completely grown over, actually, the place. It became a jungle. And then it was rediscovered in the late 19th century, and there began to be archaeological digs and so forth that resurrected it. But of course, through the sutras, it continued to live all these many, many years. So just to give you an idea of what's there now, Venerable Semke and I were there when we did our pilgrimage with the folks from Deer Park in 2013. So here's just some of the basic ruins of the little kutis, the water centers. I think there's a lot of speculation about what these things are. 2 nuns trying to meditate. It was very cold in India at that time. And just to show you this is what Sravasti in modern times looks like. A torn billboard with a tourist sign. So that's what it was. So going forward to about the late 1990s, I don't remember the exact date, but Venerable Chödrön was well on the way to founding her monastery. Her plan, her vision was growing. And she asked His Holiness the Dalai Lama to name this monastery that she had envisioned. And His Holiness's private office asked her to give a list of names and that he would pick one from that. And so among the names that she picked, and I have never heard the list, someday maybe you can tell us, One of them was Sravasti Abbey. And she says, the piece is on our website, she said that she chose this because it was a place where monks and nuns practiced together, so that both of these were here. And of course, the term abbey being non-gender specific, it wasn't a monastery, it wasn't a nunnery. We could borrow from English language and call it an abbey. And of that list, His Holiness picked that name. So it's His Holy, first Venerable Children recognizing the significance of this place, and then His Holiness agreeing with that recognition, named the place where we now live and practice, Sravasti Abbey. So you could say that we are sister cities with the place in India, the Sister City Exchange Program. So, okay, so going forward then, Chetsang Rinpoche is an amazing Lama, I think, a man with tremendous vision. He's the head of the Drikung lineage. His official name, His Holiness Drikung Kyabgyang Chetsang Rinpoche, is visionary in many ways. But one of the things that he wanted to do was to establish a place, a temple at Sravasti, near the ruin, that would help to revive the spiritual significance of that place. Okay, so that is in process. So then we have to come back to this abbey. So we started with one nun, as we all know, and two cats will be famous forever because they too came. And I believe it was very clear from the get-go for everyone who came that the nuns, and they were nuns in the beginning, or the women in the beginning, would be ordained in the lineage that gave full ordination for women. That was just a given. As people may or may not know, that although the Buddha allowed and gave ordination to women in his time, the lineages died out in every tradition except the Dharmaguptaka tradition that has flourished throughout time in China, Vietnam, Korea, Japan for the time that they had it. I think for the time that they had it, but that's gone in Japan now too. And so the only option for people here who wanted to get full ordination was that we would also train in this Dharmaguptaka lineage. However, it was all in Chinese. And so one of the things that happened, so we had our first nun, we had our second nun, we had our first nun, we had our first residence. This is our first ordination. And as you can see, I looked this up to see how many translators are credited just from getting this just from our Prasada book. I don't have the ordination book here. Venerable Tian Chang was involved. Miao Shu Lien was involved. Bhikshuni Karma Lekshi Somo and Venerable Bhikshuni Hengqing had some editorial work early on. Venerable Jindi, of course, was involved. And then Venerable Damcho came later, and Venerable Chudran edited all of this. So in our first ordination was Venerable Tarpa, as you know. In 2006, we needed 4 bhikshunis. We only had 1. And so Venerable Tian Chang came, and then 2 nuns from, I think it's the Fayun Temple, in New Mexico. Right up, so they're planning, rehearsing the ordination. They're translating this as they go. I don't know if you can see the text, but she's holding Chinese, right? What she is holding is a Chinese text. So that first ordination was one of the many times actually that I have seen here, where the Taiwanese nuns and Venerable Chudran mostly, anybody else that could drop in, working together around the text to translate these rituals, to translate these ceremonies, to translate the Vinaya into a language that we can understand and practice and follow. So they did their little ordination, and there is the photo of the first ordination with our nuns, and Venerable Tarpa is our first nun. So nuns followed, nuns were ordained. By the time Venerable Jigme and I went to Taiwan in 2011, we finally had enough bhikshunis to do our first posada. So this is a photo from the first bhikshuni posada at Sravasti Abbey, where you may recognize the carpet. It was the library at the time, and that was the place where we did you see that there is a handbell, there are no gongs, there are no fish, there's not much, but there is a little text that we could follow because it had been translated by these people and edited and rehearsed. So we did our practices for a while, and then after a few years, we were able to invite Venerable Hengqing, and she brought along with her Venerable Hong Fan to teach us how to do the Varsa. So this was in 2014. You may also notice we were in this building, but there wasn't very much in this building. Look how kind of sparse the altar looks. We were freshly in this building. This was January 2014. So they came to teach. Again, the translation list is long. All of this had to be translated, and then we had to learn how to do it. So Venerable Hengqing and Venerable Hong Fan taught us. You can see here we are, similar setup from those days, but learning how to do a Varsa, how to enter, how to do the ceremony. Well, I'm not there yet. We'll get there. Because here we are, once again, this is a familiar scene. We have so many pictures like this of nuns poring over computers and poring over text and making notes to revise the text so that we can do these ceremonies in English and so they make sense. So Venerable Hong Fan was really where we learned how to chant. She taught us how to use these, how to use the instruments, and we learned to rehearse it. We practiced with it. Can you see? I picked this because you can see Venerable Hengqing's beaming smile in the back, looking proudly at these nuns practicing this ceremony. And here we are rehearsing again before we do it. I don't know how many rehearsals we did, but it's a very relaxed and fun and happy group getting ready to do our Varsa. And this was the first Varsa in 2014. We had learned to chant. Venerable Children was learning to bow to the incense offering. She's walking down the aisle to make that offering. And so that's how we came to be able to have access to these ceremonies. So we go back then to Chetsong Rinpoche and his vision. A part of building this temple and center, it's really quite amazing looking. We'll see how, we'll see. Was that in order to establish the spiritual vibrancy that he wanted to restore, he said, I will sponsor a Varsa at this site again every year. And so Khenmo Drolma, who has a very, very important role in this, is one of his closest Bhikshuni disciples, longest Bhikshuni disciples. And he said, okay, the first year we're going to do it for Theravadan monks. And as I understand the story, granted this is second or third hand, she said, and what about the nuns? And Rinpoche didn't miss a beat. He said, they will be the second year. They will be the second year. And so in 2019, 108 Theravadan Theravadan monks did the full Varsa, 3 months of Varsa at this center here. And so that was the inauguration of bringing back the Varsas. In 2019, in 2019 also, Khenmo Drolma had the news that she was to be organizing this next year Varsa in 2020. And she turned immediately to Venerable Children because she knew we had done them. She had been relying on Venerable actually quite a long time for how to establish the nunnery that she's the head of in the East Coast. And through our connections with the Taiwanese, she met Venerable Hengqing, she met Venerable Wuyan, she went to Taiwan, she got some direction. And there was a lot of momentum going forward to do this in 2020. But alas, then came COVID, and it was stalled for that period of time. So the question then becomes, then how come we're going? Well, because of all of this, because we do it in English. And the nuns who are becoming for this Varsa this year, there are 145. It's a half Varsa. It's only 6 weeks. Bhikshunis from India, Vietnam, Bhutan, Nepal, Taiwan, Australia, France, Thailand, and the United States. So there's nuns coming from all over the world Some, of course, the Vietnamese and some of the Bhutanese and so forth are Dharmaguptaka nuns. There are also some ruler Sravastivada nuns from the Tibetan tradition who will be there. The common language is English. I don't know how common that will be. We'll find out when we get there. But the requirement was you have to have some English proficiency in order to come. And as far as we know, we're the only people in the world who are doing these ceremonies in English. So through the efforts of all that translation and translating the music, I forgot to mention Venerable Thubten, that we were able to, get the Chinese tunes to these ceremonies in English and then put them together with the effort to bring this all together in a way that these rituals can be enacted in the way I think the Buddha intended them to be. In the language that will now be the common language for this Varsa is why we're going, is to be able to lead them, to lead the ceremonies. Venerable Children, of course, was also invited to teach, and through circumstances is not able to do that. Yes, that, and also you have kind of a big travel schedule. Let's not mention that, but yeah. So Venerable just could not accept that invitation, reluctantly, sadly, I think, very sadly. And so Venerable Damcho, who has translated a tremendous amount of this material, has the assignment to give those teachings. The abbess for the event will be Venerable Guoguang from the Dharma Drum. She's one of the most senior nuns of that organization. It's one of the big four in Taiwan, biggest four monasteries. She has much experience in leading the community and also many years of retreat experience as well. So this Varsa then will be a time an international time to bring nuns community together for the first time. Some of these nuns are used to being led by women. Some of these nuns are not. So that's going to be an interesting gathering of nuns who haven't been led by the full Bhikshuni Sangha before. We've had to do some adaptation for the ceremonies that we normally do, because trying to get 145 nuns to bow to the abbess will be there for 7 days before we get into Varsa, and I don't think that's allowed. But we've made some good changes, and that Venerable Guoguang has supported. The program is based on the 3 higher trainings, so of ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom. So the first 2 weeks of teachings will be on the Vinaya particularly. There will be different sessions for the Bhikshunis and for the Shramanaries, Shikshamanas, for the Vinaya teachings. The second 2 weeks are on concentration, and Khenmo Drolma will be teaching a method of practicing the Satipatthana Sutta that Rinpoche, Chitsang Rinpoche, has developed for Western students. And then the last 2 weeks, Venerable Guoguang will be teaching the wisdom section from her experience of practicing wisdom in the Chan tradition and how that works. So there will be teachings, there will be times for group activity, there will be chanting, there will be nuns being together for 3 weeks sharing the Dharma. So that's what's going to happen there. So as we go, the entire community comes with us. The entire history of how we have gotten here, not just in the last 20 years from the Abbey, but in Venerable Children's entire ordained life and all the years before that as well. The history of all the Bhikshunis from Taiwan who have made it possible for us to be here. The support of the entire Dharma community, not to leave out the monks who have supported this as well. For really, since Venerable's early time, too, there have been visionary monks who say, go, including, we must say at the top, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, saying, go, I will pray. Yes, I will pray. And so that's what this next 6 weeks will be about. Don't think for a minute that every one of you is there. And don't think for a minute that we won't wish every one of you was there when we're sitting there and going, how are we going to explain this to people who don't speak English? We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for your support and thanks for the opportunity.